A man stood quietly at the entrance of the restaurant he had built with his own hands, only to hear a young hostess politely tell him there were no tables available for someone dressed like that. Minutes later, every smile in the dining room disappeared when the truth spread from one employee to another like a wave crashing through glass. The man they had turned away wasn't just another customer. He was the owner. But by then, the damage had already reached far deeper than anyone could imagine. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel so you can join our community for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters. Graham Mercer had never believed that success should separate a person from ordinary life. Nearly 20 years earlier, he had been a struggling single father carrying his toddler daughter, Hazel, through grocery stores while working double shifts in tiny cafes just to afford rent. Every paycheck disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Some mornings he skipped breakfast so Hazel could have fresh fruit in her lunchbox. Some afternoons he walked miles because bus fare meant sacrificing dinner. Those difficult years had taught him something no business school ever could. People remembered how they were treated long after they forgot what they were served. When Graham finally opened his first restaurant, he wrote one simple promise in a notebook instead of hanging it on the wall. Every guest would leave feeling respected, whether they ordered the most expensive meal or only a cup of coffee. That promise became the foundation of a restaurant that slowly earned awards, glowing reviews, and loyal customers from every walk of life. As the company expanded, Graham refused luxury offices and expensive suits. He preferred worn denim jackets, comfortable boots, and spending time quietly observing his restaurants without announcing who he was. He believed a business showed its true character only when nobody thought the owner was watching. Years passed, and success brought challenges Graham had never expected. More restaurants meant more managers, more supervisors, and more distance between himself and daily operations. He trusted people, sometimes too easily. As long as reports looked excellent and customer reviews remained positive, he assumed the culture he had built was still alive. One bright Saturday afternoon, after spending the morning repairing an old fence at his modest home, Graham decided to visit the flagship restaurant without informing anyone. His clothes carried traces of dust and faded paint, and his baseball cap shaded his face. He looked more like a construction worker finishing a weekend project than the founder of one of the city's most respected restaurants. The dining room buzzed with cheerful conversations, sunlight streamed through enormous windows, and families celebrated birthdays while friends laughed over lunch. Graham smiled proudly from the doorway. This place still felt alive. It still looked like the dream he had built from nothing. The young hostess greeted him with practiced politeness before her smile subtly changed as her eyes traveled across his worn clothing. She glanced toward several empty tables reserved for later reservations, then quietly explained that there were no suitable tables available. While speaking with another elegantly dressed couple moments later, she somehow found an excellent table immediately beside the windows. Graham nodded gently and thanked her anyway. He had experienced rejection before. What hurt was not the refusal itself but the reason behind it. As he stepped aside, he noticed an elderly veteran standing nearby with his wife. They too were told the restaurant was completely full despite several empty tables remaining untouched. Minutes later another fashionable group walked directly inside without delay. Graham's heart sank. This wasn't simply poor management, this was judgment. Instead of revealing his identity, he quietly sat on a bench outside the restaurant overlooking the busy street. He watched employees rush confidently through the afternoon, completely unaware that the person observing every detail was the man whose sacrifices had made all their careers possible. He remembered another afternoon nearly 2 decades earlier when he had stood outside a restaurant holding little Hazel after another interview rejection. The manager had looked at his second-hand shoes before deciding he wasn't the kind of person customers wanted to see. Graham had promised himself then that nobody entering his future business would ever feel invisible because of appearance, yet history had somehow returned. Inside the restaurant, assistant manager Colton Reeves praised the staff for maintaining the right atmosphere. Several employees interpreted those words as encouragement to prioritize wealthy-looking guests over everyone else. None of them realized how dangerous those assumptions had become. A dishwasher named Nolan happened to walk outside carrying recycling bins. He froze immediately upon recognizing Graham sitting quietly on the bench. Nolan had attended orientation years earlier, where Graham personally welcomed every new employee regardless of position. Graham remembered names. He remembered families. He even remembered Nolan mentioning his dream of becoming a chef one day. Nolan's face turned pale. Without saying anything, he hurried back inside. Within seconds whispers spread through the kitchen. The owner was outside, the owner had been denied a table, the owner had watched everything. Confidence disappeared almost instantly, servers stopped smiling naturally, managers exchanged frightened glances. The hostess realized what had happened only after seeing Graham's photograph displayed in the employee office. Tears filled her eyes before she even stepped outside. Colton rushed toward the entrance, his heartbeat pounding louder than the dishes clattering in the kitchen. He found Graham still sitting peacefully on the bench, feeding tiny crumbs to a pair of curious birds that had landed nearby. For several long moments, neither man spoke. Graham eventually stood, brushed dust from his hands, and walked calmly inside. Every employee gathered near the entrance. Nobody knew what to expect. Some feared immediate termination, others expected shouting. Instead, Graham slowly looked around the dining room. He admired the polished floors, the carefully arranged flowers, the beautiful lighting. Everything looked perfect, everything except the reason the restaurant had once existed. His expression carried disappointment rather than anger, and somehow that hurt everyone even more. He explained that buildings could always be repaired. Menus could always improve. Decorations could always change. But once kindness disappeared, no renovation could restore the soul of a restaurant. The silence became almost unbearable. The hostess began crying openly. Her name was Tessa, and she admitted she had assumed someone dressed like Graham probably wouldn't order much. She confessed that she worried expensive-looking guests expected a certain atmosphere. Somewhere along the way she had mistaken appearance for value. Graham thanked her for telling the truth, not because it excused what happened, because honesty was where healing began. Then Graham surprised everyone. Instead of discussing himself, he asked employees about the elderly veteran who had also been turned away. Nobody knew where the couple had gone. Without hesitation Graham asked several staff members to search nearby while he himself walked through neighboring streets looking for them. Nearly 40 minutes later they found the couple sitting quietly in a small park sharing sandwiches from a grocery store. The elderly man recognized Graham immediately from local newspaper articles years before. Embarrassed, Graham apologized personally for the experience they had endured. The veteran simply smiled sadly and admitted rejection no longer surprised him. His wife gently explained they weren't upset about missing lunch, they were celebrating 60 years of marriage. This restaurant had been their dream destination because their granddaughter had saved money to buy them a gift certificate. The reservation had represented something special, not luxury, love. Graham felt tears forming as he listened. He invited them back, but not because he owned the restaurant. He invited them because they deserved the celebration they had planned. When the couple returned, every employee stood waiting. No applause, no dramatic spectacle, just sincere respect. The table by the windows remained exactly as it had earlier, only now it welcomed the people who should have been seated there from the beginning. Kitchen staff prepared the finest meal they had ever served. Servers worked together with extraordinary care, yet the greatest change wasn't the food. It was the humility filling every corner of the restaurant. Over the following weeks Graham postponed expansion plans and focused entirely on rebuilding the company's culture. New training emphasized empathy before efficiency. Employees volunteered at shelters, community kitchens, and senior centers, not for publicity but to better understand the people they served every day. Hiring interviews changed too. Technical skills still mattered, but kindness became the most important qualification. Tessa considered resigning because she couldn't forgive herself. Graham asked her to stay. He explained that people who genuinely learned from painful mistakes often became the strongest examples for others. Months later, new employees listened quietly as Tessa shared her own story during orientation. She described how one moment of judgment had almost destroyed everything she believed about herself. Her honesty reached hearts far more effectively than any training manual ever could. Nolan eventually achieved his dream of becoming a chef. Graham proudly promoted him after watching not only his culinary talent but also the compassion he showed every dishwasher, server, and delivery driver. Nolan never forgot the afternoon he saw the owner sitting alone outside. Hazel, now an accomplished architect, visited the restaurant one sunny afternoon. She watched families laughing together, elderly couples treated with warmth, children welcomed with genuine smiles, and workers greeting every guest exactly the same way. She noticed a small framed sentence hanging near the employee entrance. "It wasn't about profits. It wasn't about awards. It simply read, 'The way we treat the person everyone overlooks reveals who we truly are.'" Hazel smiled because she recognized those words from the notebook her father had carried since the beginning. The restaurant continued growing, not because of expensive advertising or celebrity endorsements, but because customers felt something impossible to fake. They sensed dignity. They sensed sincerity. They sensed that every person mattered the moment they walked through the door. Graham never stopped visiting anonymously. Sometimes he wore work boots, sometimes gardening clothes, sometimes old sweaters with faded elbows. Employees no longer judged any guest by appearance because they finally understood a lesson much bigger than identifying the owner. Every stranger carried a story, every face represented someone's parent, child, friend, or hero. Respect should never depend on clothing, wealth, or status. Years later, people still told the story of the afternoon the restaurant owner was denied a table in his own business. Most believed it was famous because of the embarrassment that followed. They were wrong. It became unforgettable because one man's quiet grace transformed a painful mistake into a lasting culture of compassion. Graham could have chosen revenge. He chose responsibility instead. He understood that leadership was never about proving authority. It was about creating people who treated others with kindness even when nobody important seemed to be watching. Before we end, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment sharing a time when someone showed you unexpected kindness or a moment when you learned never to judge someone by appearances. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. As the afternoon sun poured through the restaurant windows, Graham quietly watched another family being welcomed with warm smiles and genuine respect. This time no one looked at their clothes before offering them a seat. No one measured their worth before offering kindness. In that simple moment, Graham realized his greatest achievement had never been building a successful restaurant. It had been helping ordinary people discover that the richest thing they could ever serve another human being was compassion. And that lesson would continue reaching hearts long after every meal had been finished.